Okay, this is going to be a weird one, but I do want to document this right now while it's still fresh in my mind. So bear with me, this is unscripted. Um, I'm going to start with the problem itself, and luckily I got an example out of many that happened. I have one that I recorded. So this just happens to be streaming on Twitch. The platform doesn't matter. What I'm talking about here is an audio problem. And I'm also talking about an audio problem that's specific to a particular setting in Ableton. So let's just listen to the problem. So this is a generative track that's playing along. It's going on for 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, and I've turned this down because this will hurt my ears and yours if I don't turn this way down, but this is going to be a massive clipping in real life, and I'll show you the meters when this happens. But this thing's going along for 19 minutes, and then we hear this. Wait for it. Wait for it. All right, all right, all right. That's enough. That's enough. Okay, but imagine that happening during a stream or something like that. And let's just take a quick look at the actual, a little closer look maybe. If we look at this top track here in Ableton, we can see it's totally maxed out. Okay. So what the hell's going on, right? In order to troubleshoot this, I ended up having to just create a list of things. But let's look at the session itself here. And I'm going to shrink this down so that we can see it here better. This session is not a very complicated one. There's only a few instruments, and the problem is happening, or was happening, I should say, with only this first wavetable instrument here. But before I get into this too much here, I'm going to bring up my list of testing and what was involved in solving this problem, so that you can see the level of detail involved sometimes in these things. And this is only for the truly obsessed, I would say. So the problem started, that problem that we just heard there started when I was in the middle of streaming on my PC setup through my ATEM Mini Pro. I had Ableton set up as a screen share through a camera, a camera input. I had a camera, and I had a visual, audio visual synthesizer thing. And so there was a lot of connections, a lot of things that could potentially contribute to a problem. So the first set of tests that we see here are taking the ATEM out of the mix and then trying to put the ATEM back in the mix to see if the issue happens, and also switching where I'm streaming to. All of this turned out to be a red herring. The very last test here, using the laptop sound only, no audio mixer. I have an Allen and Heath audio interface. I pulled that out of the mix. I still had the issue with the laptop only, laptop sound only. So I knew, and the ATEM is actually connecting through an analog connection that's kind of separate from all this. But that told me that yes, the problem is caused somewhere in Ableton. So what's the next step? The next step is, in this case, I have the luxury of being able to test this also on the Mac. My Mac setup is completely different. I have a completely different audio interface. I do have a streaming setup here for this device, but I was going to ignore streaming because it's not a streaming issue. So we start running this test on the Mac, and I hit the issue at 46 minutes. It makes that noise. So imagine I'm trying to test this. 46 minutes is not even a full hour performance. I mean, I'm trying to break this as much as I can. So to me, that's not acceptable that it could happen 45 minutes into a set. Um, what was interesting there was that I was able to stop the sequencer, and this noise feedback loop, or whatever you want to call it, stopped, and I was able to further identify that it's only coming from that one Dr. Chaos track, which, if we remember, is right here. Okay, bear with me. It's getting deep. So I continued testing, thinking of, okay, what could be causing this, bringing all of my experience to bear on what could be causing this. It's obviously not a true clip in terms of audio, because this is a MIDI device, for one thing, that's creating the sound. There were no clips. It was well below. It was like -6 dB as it was running. And so then I started thinking of things like, okay, maybe there's a reverb, a feedback loop due to reverb that's feeding into itself that over time gradually builds up. Or maybe it's a delay that's gradually building up. And I did have reverb and delay on the track, so that's very possible that could have been the case. So I pulled the reverb and the delay out and continued to do tests. The one test I did, had the noise problem right after 2 minutes. So there's no logic in the terms of the time. We've seen 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 46 minutes, 2 minutes. So there's no logic there, right? Doesn't matter the platform, doesn't matter the audio interface. So that my options here are running out on what this could be. Then I started looking at what else could be happening here. So continued to test with the delay, without the delay. Then I started looking at closer at what I had on this device here. If we look at this device on its first channel, I have the Dr. Chaos, which is just a Euclidean sequencer. It's generating the note data, and it has a velocity built in here that you can assign some chance to. And right now, the highest velocity that it can go is 100. And the chance, when we add the chance, it will randomize anywhere between 0 and 100. I had also, at the time, through all of those tests, this additional velocity plugin, which is an Ableton standard tool, which you could use to randomize velocity or adjust velocity. And I also had this maxed out at 127. So let's think about this a minute. This device is creating random velocities. Every note is coming across random velocity. Every so often, it's going to have some that are 100. We don't know when that's going to happen, but it's going to eventually happen. It might take 20 minutes. It might take 2 minutes, but eventually it's going to happen. Then we have this. If this is turned on, this can take that velocity and crank it up even further on a random basis. It's not going to do it all the time, but it could take that and bring it up to as high as 127. We can't go any higher than 127. Now, by itself, without this, the Dr. Chaos by itself, I don't have to worry about hitting 127. But as soon as I add this other device, I have to worry about that. And the only reason I added this other device was to try to get even more variety in the velocity, which was the wrong approach. Because what's happening is when this is engaged, that's when I have this sound. When this is not engaged, I just ran a test for over 60 minutes, and I have not seen the issue since. So and then I went back over to the PC. So we got this working on the Mac. Then I went back over to the PC and got it working on the PC. And so independent of platform, I know that I can get it to work. So let's listen to that noise again, so you can appreciate why I put this much work into this. If you're just tuning in, so you're going along, everything's fine, and now you have this noise come up. Imagine if you have headphones on when this happens. Okay. Imagine if you have headphones on. Now, luckily, during every one of these tests, I did not go near the headphones. I left the headphones alone. I turned my speakers way down doing this testing. You got to really protect yourself. So when I get back into Ableton here, and if I make sure that velocity thing's off, and I just play this, I've got my reverb and my delay back in. And I think what pushed me towards my solution, besides just really having to think through it, was this one test here where I had 268 overs. So that's telling me that there's something really wrong. That was happening on this first track here, right here in this value here. This was 268 overs on that track alone, which carried over to the master track. And you should never have that. You should really never have that at all. I think I would also, in retrospect, I would also probably add, in addition to not doing the whole nonsense with the velocity, I would probably try to put a utility in here to adjust the gain. And maybe, since this is at 0, I don't want to touch that, but maybe pull this down just so that can never. But I think you'd still have a problem if that velocity was on. It's still going to clip it here, and this may or may not help you. So yeah, really obscure. 2.5 days of testing to figure this out. So I figured if this helps anybody else, great. Let's let people know about it. So happy composing and streaming, and we'll talk to you later.